Let's talk about two of the biggest events of the 20th century, World War I and the Russian Revolution. Now, these weren't just two separate things happening at the same time. No, one directly caused the other. We're going to trace exactly how that global war lit the fuse for a revolution that changed the world.
It's a massive question, right? How can a war on foreign soil cause a 300-year-old dynasty to just completely implode from the inside? Well, for the Russian Empire, it wasn't one single event. It was more like a cascade of failures, one after the other.
The best way to think about it is like a line of dominoes. The war was the finger that tipped the very first one, and the rest just came crashing down in this sequence of disasters. So let's follow that chain, domino by domino. To really get this, we have to understand that the Russian Empire in 1914 was already a pressure cooker waiting to explode. It had all these deep political and social problems bubbling just under the surface. The war didn't create these problems, but man, it cranked up the heat until the whole thing blew.
And that brings us to the first and maybe the biggest domino to fall, the complete and utter breakdown of the Russian military on the brutal Eastern Front.
The human cost was just staggering. We are talking about millions of soldiers killed or wounded. This isn't just a number on a page. It was a catastrophic loss of life that absolutely shattered the army's will to fight and completely destroyed what little support was left for the war back home.
And it wasn't just one problem, it was a total system failure. You had soldiers being sent to the front lines without guns, without enough ammunition, without proper food, and sometimes even without winter coats. You pair that with terrible leadership and a transportation system that was completely broken. It was a recipe for disaster. The army wasn't just losing, it was literally disintegrating.
So, as the army is crumbling out there on the front lines, all of that chaos starts to ricochet right back to the capital. The crisis wasn't just in the trenches anymore. It was now on the home front.
And right in the middle of all of this, you have Tsar Nicholas II. He makes what might be one of the worst decisions in modern history. He decides to take personal command of the army himself. The huge problem, he had practically zero military experience. So he leaves the capital to go play general, and in doing so, he creates a massive power vacuum right where it matters most. And the result of that decision was immediate. With the Tsar gone, the government back home, which was already pretty weak, just became paralyzed by corruption and incompetence. Nothing was getting done. The country was basically rudderless, and people were getting furious. This government failure had very real, very painful consequences for everybody else. Supply chains just fell apart. This led to huge food shortages in the cities, and prices for what little food there was went through the roof. People were hungry, they were angry, and they started taking to the streets.
Okay, so you've got a collapsing army on one hand and a starving, enraged population on the other. That pressure cooker was about to blow. This toxic combination led directly to the first major explosion of 1917. The year 1917 was just an absolute whirlwind. In March, the street protests got so big they actually forced the Tsar to give up his throne. A new government, called the Provisional Government, takes over. But, and this is the absolute crucial point, they made the fatal decision to keep Russia in the war. And that decision basically set the stage for a second, much more radical revolution just a few months later. The new government's failure to get out of the war created this huge opening, a power vacuum, that a new, more radical group was just waiting to fill.
It's almost unbelievable when you lay it out like this. The provisional government got power for one main reason, because the Tsar was failing at the war. And what's the first thing they do? They make the exact same mistake. They continue the unpopular, failing war. It was the one error they just couldn't afford to make. By staying in the war, the new government pretty much instantly lost the support of the soldiers and the workers. It became weak, unpopular, and totally unable to control the country.
And who stepped right into this power vacuum? A radical party called the Bolsheviks, led by this guy, Vladimir Lenin. They saw how weak the government was, and they had one very simple, very powerful promise for the Russian people.
This was their slogan, and it was pure genius in its simplicity. Peace for the soldiers who were sick of dying for nothing, land for the peasants who farmed it but didn't own it, and bread for the starving workers in the cities. It was a direct answer to every single person suffering. So riding this huge wave of popular support, the Bolsheviks seized power in November of 1917. And now we see the final domino fall, as they immediately move to make good on their most important promise.
In early 1918, they did it. They signed a peace treaty with Germany. This officially pulled Russia out of World War I, which let the new Bolshevik government focus all its energy on holding on to power at home.
Now, the price for peace was incredibly high. Russia had to give up massive chunks of its territory. But for the Bolsheviks, and honestly for millions of Russians, ending the constant bloodshed was the only thing that mattered anymore.
So, let's just recap that chain reaction one last time. World War I exposed just how weak the Russian Empire really was. That led to military collapse and chaos at home, which sparked a revolution. The new government then failed to end the war, which got it toppled too. And finally, the Bolsheviks were able to seize power by promising the one thing everybody wanted: peace.
The fall of the Russian Empire is just this incredible, stark reminder of how the immense strain of war can shatter a society from the inside out. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What lessons does this century-old story of collapse hold for the pressures and conflicts nations are facing today?